Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
First one comes from Harold Williams in Portsmouth, and Harold wonders, why does a live remote contributor to a news broadcast wait several seconds before they start talking? Why don't news stations synchronize their contributors like Office Hours does?
And I think this is mostly the BBC does this. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. I mean, one thing we notice in the internet world and with satellites is there can be a significant lag between what someone says on a microphone and when they hear the program that they're on coming back. So we used to see this a lot in news broadcasts from across the world on remote pickups. There would be an uncomfortable delay between somebody saying, "What do you think about that?" and the person being interviewed actually answered. The other thing I'll say is that in the olden days, and this is just real quick, historically, carrier waves used to be part of radio signals, and things like fighter pilots and other people would go, "ah," and then say something because they were using the "ah" sound to establish the carrier wave before they actually put their content up. Just a little historical trivia. A lot of reasons for delays.
Try not to say before everything you say. I'm
yeah,
meetings where some people do that really loud. They do it exactly as loud as Bill, and you're just like, oh my gosh, please stop. Go ahead, Mickey.
Exactly what Bill said. Both the contribution feed coming into the studio and the return IFB going into the town's ears or the field reporter's ears may have to go through a bunch of systems that add latency to it. So they just have to listen for that cue which comes in latent before they can start speaking. And that's why typically like your anchor in the studio says a keyword, either the field reporter's name or a cue that's like back to you or something like that before the reporter can comfortably or reliably come in with their contribution from outside. They wait for that keyword before they start speaking.
Yeah, it's to the satellite is about 600 milliseconds. So if they're using a satellite contribution, and when I said BBC, what I meant was at the very beginning of every top of every hour, the BBC has this weird pause that Nigel's explained in the past, but which I find hilarious because every BBC anchor does it slightly differently, and I love to watch like what kind of style they have for that weird pause that the BBC has at the top of every hour. But Mickey's and Bill are totally right. It's about 600 milliseconds up, 600 milliseconds down. We usually calculate about a second and a half of delay if they're remote going over satellite. Now, if they're in the United States and they're in insert studio, it's just because the network is cheap. So they're using typically either an SRT or LTN feed, which needs a little more latency. So it's going to have 500 to 1,000 milliseconds on each end because of the style of latency that it works on. Whereas if there was a time where you didn't see any of this in the United States because everyone was trying to do their best job, right? And they weren't trying to cut corners. And when they were doing that, they were using least fiber from the switch, and that latency is about less than 100 milliseconds. It's less than Zoom. It's about half of Zoom. So they had zero latency, and everything really felt tight. And they stopped doing that just before COVID. The people, the news industry is making less money, and so they started figuring out how do we do this for less. And so the other thing that caused some of that delay was because they started sending video returns. So for a long time, what would happen is if you were a contributor, you'd be on what's called a POTS line. It's a plain old telephone system. So this is copper POTS lines that would come back to you because they were the lowest latency, fastest way to get you the return. You couldn't see anything in front of you. You just looked at the camera. And most insert studios still do that. But they started putting in the video. When they added the video, they added the need for more latency, and it doubled the cost, which is also why they started looking for cheaper solutions, which have more latency, and you end up with people nodding. But there's really, I understand it for smaller networks, but for major networks to do it, I mean, you have to remember that they're doing so many hits, it would be expensive, but still, for a major network with millions of people watching, they should really, in my opinion, ante up for a little less latency. It's a little embarrassing. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I was going to mention POTS lines as well. And even with video contribution, a lot of networks or broadcasters still typically utilize POTS lines for the return IFB feed, even though the return video is coming over IP and their actual contribution going out to the studios over IP. A lot still opt for POTS lines because of the relatively low latency compared to sending it over SRTO or whatever IP
And
system they may be using.
And one of the challenges is these days, POTS lines are being phased out by the telephone companies in the United States. And so it gets harder and harder to even have those lines available. Next question.
Roscoe Jones is up next from Madison, Indiana. What can you tell me about the miking on this guitar? Why are there two mics, and what work might have been done to the sound in post? And he's got a link there to something where you can see the mics.
Go ahead, Marty. Can't hear you, Marty.
Yep, let's take a look at what this is. So we have an acoustic guitar player in a studio, and there's two microphones, one slightly below the strings, and one just above the strings, hung from above. These are the top one at least. It's difficult to tell what brand or model these are, but they are large diaphragm microphones that are have multiple patterns that you can select from. So it can be cardioid, can be omnidirectional, can be bidirectional. And the idea here is that each microphone is capturing a different flavor of the sound. One might be more directional and just picking up the picking of the strings and the sound hole. The other could be a more open pattern where it's picking up some of the ambience of the room, possibly with a different kind of voicing, a different frequency response. And so in post, these are recorded separately on two different tracks, and then in post they can be combined and processed in order to achieve the desired sound of the guitar, the balance of the body, the resonance, the strings. And that's why they have two microphones. Sometimes there can be more than two microphones. There might be a very typical place to put a microphone for an acoustic guitar is where the body and the neck meet. Is a place that's very popular and produces a certain kind of sound.
Go ahead, Chris.
All right. I'm a disruptor for sure. So when I see this, a couple things. One, you have these two different microphones. The idea is to blend these flavors, okay? The mics are in the same spot on the guitar, on either side of the string. So really, it's not a thing where you're going to get different parts of the guitar, okay? So like you would need microphones literally on like down farther on the neck to get string sound from that and actually be able to like widen stereo image and all that. When I listen to this, I have to say, I don't like how this guitar sounds at all. And it's not what I would be using for any kind of reference for anything. It's really uninspiring to me when I listen to it. And also there's a lot of room noise. There's things, he's in a studio. My raw audio sounds insanely better than that guitar while I'm recording. Or I'm starting over. It has to. So for me, I think that that's a really important thing. And again, no slight on anyone. This is all a matter of like opinion and all of this, but it's really important that if you want to, I can't tell you what would have been done because there's so many things that can be done. I mean, this is completely, it's painters with paint. I don't know what they did, but it's end result wise, it's incredibly flat and I don't feel any kind of real life in the recording when I listen to it. So
go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I agree. So first of all, before I even talk about the sound, the top mic, I was taking a look, and obviously it looks like a Neumann microphone. And based on the switch on the back for the polar patterns, it looks like this one. It looks like an M149 tube. The switch, it looks almost identical. So I'm guessing it's probably this M149. As far as the other mic on the back, just because the quality of the video, the blacks are crushed, it just looks like a black blob to me. I mean, that could be almost anything. As far as the sound, I agree with Chris. The first thing I noticed immediately was really? You've got an expensive Neumann mic, and that's the sound that you got out of it. It could be the sound of the room. It could be a bunch of different things. Also, part of the factor of the sound is the guitar itself. And I can see that the person in that video, incredibly talented player, by the way. Wow, that is an amazing playing. But the guitar itself is a smaller body guitars, and what I find is that a lot of smaller body guitars, they don't have that full richness. They don't resonate as well. So that also is a factor of it. For me, for on-camera stuff, I probably would have just used one microphone on this. And again, microphones are totally subjective. But just as an example, like some of the Mojave microphones sound amazing, like an MA1000 tube mic. They're tuned slightly on the brighter side, but on an acoustic instrument like this, wow, do they sound incredible. I probably just would have put one mic in front of that guitar.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, I have to agree that in terms of I watched a video earlier, and I'm curious if the audio that we're hearing in the video is just a camera mic and not actually what's going through the microphones and the recordings, because it just sounds bad from what I would expect those microphones would be able to capture. The top microphone does indeed look like a Neumann M149, while the bottom microphone, I'm not entirely sure, but it looks to be either a Geffel M990 or a Mojave, as Alexander mentioned earlier. Although I think it's either the MA50 or the Geffel M990. Yeah, it's to be able, you'd use two microphones in this situation to capture specific aspects of the instrument. In this case, it feels like the M149 might be aimed towards capturing the detail of the plucking and the finger movements, while the other microphone, the Geffel or the Mojave, seems to be aimed a little off axis from the strings, more towards the body to perhaps get the resonance and that mid-low body of the guitar. And yeah, you would blend those together, maybe emphasize the good aspects or the aspects that you want from each microphone, and turn down the rest of it, and let each mic take specific a specific amount of space in your frequency spectrum. You can also pan them slightly to the left and to the right, just so that you can get a bit more space in the stereo field. But yeah, you'd use different microphones to capture different aspects of the instrument that you're taking, and then you mix them together.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York is up next. What are some favorite mics that the panel uses for either live streaming events or in-person events?
Go, Jeff.
So you asked mics, but there's at least five of us answering, so I'm going to pick one. I do a lot of music and classical music, and so if I need to capture mics and I don't want to capture instruments, I don't want to see the mics blocking things on camera, and I want to amplify stuff, I love the DPA 4099. It's a tiny little hypercardioid gooseneck mic, and the great thing about these is there's all kinds of little mounts that fit various instruments. So you get magnetic mounts that can go inside a piano and just clip to that magnetically attached to the soundboard. There are things that clip on violins and cello or drums, basses. There's a Velcro one that you can strap. I often will stick that on a music stand so it'll pick up the instrument. I don't have to put it on the instrument. So the versatility of this, and it has adapters that can go into wireless if you need them to be wireless. It's a fabulous thing, and a very natural sound pickup, considering that it's extremely close to the instrument, which is not a natural place to pick up instruments. But if you need to have gain before feedback and you don't want to see microphones on camera, great option.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so for voiceover, I changed over what I was using, which was a more traditional large diaphragm, and the debate on this is mind-blowing, but yes, a shotgun mic, speaking directly into a shotgun mic, there's tons of arguments for and tons of arguments against, but one of the things it did for me in my booth, I have tons of acoustic treatment, and so it does a great job of dealing with reflections and bass if I have to get up on the mic. But it's not quote-unquote soundproofed. We often talk about the difference. And this cured whether there's construction going on outside. I'm in a condo, so if my neighbors are getting nuts upstairs, the direction of the shotgun mic can cure all that, and it's just completely removed from whether I'm recording or live streaming.
Alex?
Yeah, I'm going to, if we're talking live events, live streaming, I'm assuming we're talking about speech. So I'm only going to mention a couple suggestions here for this very specific use case. Obviously, tried and true SM58, whether it's in a wireless capsule version or in a wired version. I've also, for vocals, I'm really a big fan of the SEV7 microphone, and that they do make that in both a wired version, and they happen to make a wireless capsule that is compatible with Shure wireless systems. So I'm a big fan of that mic.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, it depends. It totally depends on what you're trying to mic, what you're trying to broadcast, what you're trying to amplify in this space. As Alexander mentioned, tried and true SM58. I always have at least one of the SM58s in my Pelican when I have a show. Same with a pair of Sennheiser 416s, which make for good FX mics, crowd mics, room mics. These are the two microphones that I always have with me with any production.
Next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York's up next. Morning, everyone. I'm looking for a QR code inventory management software tool. What does the panel recommend? Preferably macOS, but I can work with Windows too.
Go ahead, Ken.
Hi, I'm here only for the non-audio question today. This is the perfect example of where you can use an AI tool to build something exactly what you want. I put a link in the Makana for one that quickly generated. The benefit of this is you can tailor it exactly to your needs. This is something very simple that most any of the AI models can build, particularly like Gemini from Google. It's free. Use the Pro 2.5 model. And it can generate that thing for you. Benefit also, you can then ask it for what improvements it could make, and it can add that code to it as well. As I said, link in the in Makana.
Yeah, and we built ours in I don't know what I would build it in today, but we built it maybe with AI. We built ours in FileMaker, of all things, and it worked out. We built a pretty complicated one, and you can get your own scanners that are like USB scanners or Bluetooth scanners, and you're scanning stuff on the way in and on the way out. We printed a lot of QR codes. The hardest part is not the QR code process; it's the wetware of people actually doing things as things come in. So that was the biggest challenge with the process. Next, so you got to really think about how easy it is for them to bring things in and let them go. Next question.
Harold Williams is back from Portsmouth with the audio for office hours panel members is always synchronized. Do you take specific measures to ensure it happens?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I would say for the last 30 years, we've all been making measurements to make sure that everything happens correctly. So yes, the show absolutely has a full system to be very thorough and all that, and I can let people speak far better than that. But my main point is that everybody that's on this show has been studying this stuff for decades already. And so it's, whatever the protocols are for, whatever show it is that you're trying to do, or, this show, they can obviously differ. I can say this is insanely organized. Having done a lot of productions, this team is absolutely stellar. It's a bunch of brain surgeons in here, and it's really an honor to be a part of something that works so seamlessly well. So, yeah.
And I would say we're close.
We're close
It's
always
synchronized. I wouldn't say perfectly synchronized.
We're always developing. Everyone is always. I just retweaked my studio. Everyone is always working on their craft constantly, and that's the real point here. Is that everyone has their own commitment to making everything correct outside of the show.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, going back to what Alex just mentioned, like the contribution coming into the system for office hours is coming through Zoom. So it is not. It'll never be always 100% in sync because Zoom fluctuates in terms of, especially the stability of the video contribution moves up and down. So it will never always stay 100% in sync. Saying that, though, there's been a lot of work with the engineering team within office hours that includes JJ McKenna, Tlaloc Lopez Waterman, and Chad Lafarge and myself in terms of chasing down the sync. Every single day, we're tweaking. This is the X32, or rather the M32C that the show is being mixed on. Each person has an input delay that is tweaked, along with on the output side, we also have output delay set to make sure that as much as we can, make sure that the AV is lined up, coming into the system and going out to broadcast.
And by the way, one of the reasons that it slides back and forth is because the biggest thing that takes up bandwidth is video, and sometimes it needs to drop frames. So it'll drop frames to stay under the about 6.25 meg limit that Zoom has, which is about twice everybody else's, but it's about 6. And so what happens is it has to drop some frames, and so it goes out of it drops frames. It can't do that with audio. Occasionally you'll see it do with audio, and suddenly someone talks really fast. But generally, it can't make that adjustment with audio because you'll hear clicks or you'd hear drops and so on and so forth. And so it's making that adjustment in video. And you see this on most format, most WebRTC or all of WebRTC will drop in and out. We have less of that because almost all of us are using Ethernet. So a lot of where you see a much higher variance is when people are using Wi-Fi or cellular to connect because they're losing a lot of data all the time. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so Mickey already mentioned the back-end stuff, how they have the ability to tweak everybody individually. I try to make sure things are as perfect as possible so that people don't have to work so hard when I join. So because my audio and my video pipeline are separate, and what I mean by that is that the audio is not going into my camera switcher, arriving at the same time. So what I did is I just recorded myself. I used a clapper board, and then I basically just looked at the frame offset, calculated the milliseconds that I needed to delay my audio. So I've got a 233 millisecond delay on my end that I apply on the audio output that goes out to Dante, and that's what I got.
Good, Mickey.
I just want to add as well that since office hours tends to be in the bleeding edge and also tends to be beta testers for software, each new version of software and also new hardware that's added into the pipeline requires us to do a little more work when those changes are applied in terms of getting synced back in line again.
And we're working on some new tools as well that will hopefully help us constantly be tightening this up. But sync is a really important piece of the puzzle, and we're constantly working on it. So I'd say we're close, and we're going to constantly trying to get closer. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. What makes for a good audio engineer?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Someone who knows their audio technology and can certainly geek out with audio engineers, but when musicians and producers arrive, goes completely out of the way. The audio engineer's job is to get all the technology out of the way and make art.
Go ahead, Marty.
Jeff, you just stole my keyword. When we think of engineering, we often think of technology, and we think of science, and we think of math. But mixing audio is all of that, but it is primarily art. It's an extension of the art of the performer that we are capturing and want to translate and reproduce on whatever medium the consumer is going to receive it on. And to do this, you need to have a thorough understanding of an appreciation for what you're hearing, trying to discern what you're hearing, why you're hearing what you're hearing, and what to listen for. These are very important key concepts for audio mixing, is because you are making those critical decisions and adjustments for what the consumer is going to hear, and being able to capture the performance, whether it be speech or music, being able to capture that in a clear, convincing, and accurate, transparent way, so that you have good ingredients to work with, because mixing is very much like cooking. If you have good ingredients, you have a better chance of having a good outcome. So mixing audio is a craft, it's a science, and it is an art. And understanding all three of those and everything that goes into it is very important for being a good audio engineer.
Good, Chris.
Yeah, I would say the real job here of an engineer is is to be able to use these different tools, be they analog or software or whatever they are, and put music into a delivery system that is efficient for a speaker to play in the most emotionally impactful way, right? And so there's a lot of technology in here, but it is about the art. So you have to be able to separate the two things and look at, this is what serves the art for the whole thing, and that's very, very valid and very important, kind of the most important in a lot of situations. And then what aspects of this now have to go into a like coherent delivery system for a mechanical device to do a thing, right? So these are really, really connected, and they're both really important. I would say the thing that I see where people fall off is going into situations and really forcing a thing instead of walking into a situation and just analyzing everything there and saying, what does this need? Wow, the main guy is really stressed out. Oh, he hasn't eaten today. Okay, let's figure that. You know, like whatever. I mean, you have to really look at all the different aspects of these things. Oh, he's sick. You know, she's sick, whatever. They're not going to sing as loud. I mean, things like that. You really have to get into it and just kind of look at these aspects. And I think that's when you really, really can encompass truly being an advocate for your artists in all of the realms.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, I think it all stems from firstly having the ability to recognize and appreciate good sound. Because without that, doing sound isn't well, detailed, high quality sound isn't always the easiest thing, and it takes someone who really appreciates good sound and wants to chase after it to be able to, you know, have enough gumption to work through the tough world that is you know, sound engineering. And after that, of course, attention to detail, because everything we do is very detail oriented. A lot of things that we do, no one will notice except the people who appreciate what we do.
Go, Jesse.
A lot of these answers have spoken to technology and art, and I'd like to go in a slightly different direction, and that is linguistics. I think the vocabulary around sound design is not as developed as the vocabulary around picture design in the world of media production. Beyond that, the vocabulary surrounding picture design has really penetrated the common consciousness in a way that the vocabulary surrounding audio design has not. And what makes an excellent engineer is having the linguistic intuition to ingest the needs as expressed by a layman, translate them into the vocabulary they know, and return information that makes sense to the layman.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex?
So many great points there, and I there's a lot of good things in here. I really echo what Chris was saying too, because obviously it goes without saying being competent is super important. You have to have the technical skills, but a lot of what I see makes the difference between someone that's a pretty good engineer and someone that really knows how to mix is someone who's really passionate about music. For example, like if you're a touring artist, if you have an engineer that really intimately knows your materials and knows how to communicate and work with the band and figure out like what do they want it to sound like, being able to translate that experience live to really to have that impact on the audience, to really make them feel something emotionally. And there's a lot of subtlety in mixing, and sometimes small little things make a huge, huge difference. That can only come with experience and time. And again, you have to have a passion. Having a background in music really helps too.
Next question.
Next one comes from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I utilize a Beta 87 sometimes in my home studio as my main mic for vocal recordings and Zoom meetings. Could there be any issue with using a mic in an office setting that is usually used in a live event setting?
Go ahead, Jeff.
So to answer your direct question, are you going to have issues? I would say no. You may have issues in the other way. If you're trying to use studio microphones in a live setting, you may have issues. They may not have the pop filtering that's built into a handheld vocal mic that the Beta 87 is. It may not survive as well in a live setting. But using that live mic, you'll have no problems using that in your office setting.
Go ahead, Marty. Can't hear you, Marty.
Sorry. Okay. So microphones are like tools, and there are many different tools for different applications. And it's often, you can use different tools in different applications. But so it a lot depends on what you're picking up and the acoustics of the space that you're working in, and whether the environment is noisy or quiet, and the character of the source that you're picking up. So different microphones have different kinds of different voicings, different frequency responses, different noise levels, and even different physical appearances that can be utilized to advantage or maybe a disadvantage. So you've got lavalier microphones, and you've got head-worn microphones, and you've got large diaphragm and small diaphragm microphones. Which one is going to, work best in your particular environment will have a lot of factors. But the answer to the question, as Jeff pointed out, is, in given similar situations, given favorable environments, you can use any microphone on any situation if it produces the results that you're looking for.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I agree. Like if the whatever microphone you're using, you mentioned the Beta 87, if it gets you the product that you're looking for, the recording or the capture that you're looking for, then by all means use whatever microphone makes sense. The only possible complication I might think of with the Beta 87 is that its pickup pattern is very tight. So it's a lot less forgiving about off-axis sounds being captured. If that's an issue for you or whoever's performing, then you might want to consider something that has a larger capture. But again, if it gets you the sound that you want, then use whatever you need to.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so just clarify a couple things. So the Beta 87 is a live vocal mic from Shure, okay? Not if people are thinking like U87s or anything like that. It is made for live performance. It's a vocal mic. There's two different models of it. There's the 87A, which I totally hate, and there's the 87C, which is the cardioid version, which I totally love. I found that really the best application for them in my experience is really like singer-songwriters that project really well. It's definitely a hot microphone. They can feedback in wedges, things like that. So it's a good mic to get on and to, project into. As far as your situation, what you're using, remember, live microphones are made for volatile situations. That's okay. They're stable in the worst situations. That's why we're not using studio mics that are insanely sensitive, right? So remember that already it's kind of made for what you're using. I would be cautious. Anyone who's using condensers in small rooms, particularly, remember they're really hot microphones. So they're going to pick up distance a lot farther. Now, if you get the 87A, yes, that is a much tighter pattern. If you get the C, that's just a cardioid microphone. And one thing about that characteristic is you're going to hear room noise a lot more on a hot condenser than you will on like a dynamic mic where you're close up to it. It's just going to let a lot of that stuff it's too far away and the capsule just can't pick it up. So I would kind of just think about that stuff. And yeah, if you have the 87A, I would swap it for the C because that is a great mic.
You're mentioning wedges. What ratio do you see of artists that want to use in-ears versus wedges?
Well, I kind of quit doing live sound recently, except for when I have to get pulled in and do live sound for stuff. But it really, really depends. I mean, people who are touring with wedges, people who are touring with ear rigs, I mean, it comes down to budget. Really big bands who have semis, they're bringing PA, they're bringing the stage, they're bringing all this stuff. Smaller bands touring, an ear rig is a really small, compact thing that can get you a lot of consistency, from venue to venue, particularly if you have your own microphones. If you don't have your own microphones, there's no consistency there at all. That you're defeating the entire purpose, and there's no point. But it really comes down to flow. In-ears can get so customized. Sensophonics, like Audio 64, all of these really, really like great customizing places. You're getting ear molds made, and that's right. That's the real way to do it. But this could cost $3,000 to do that.
Yeah, we see
So-
we see a lot of bands that they're, again, like local touring bands, and they have their own little rig, and they're kind of coming into that venue, and they know exactly how they want to hear everything on in-ears.
They think they do. Really, the thing is, those bands have probably never actually heard a good ear mix, so they don't know what they're shooting for. And that's the real thing, is because if they actually like brought that rig in and had a qualified engineer just driving their ears, then all of a sudden they'd hear what their kick drum actually sounds like. They might want to change their instruments actually from hearing them clearly. All of a sudden you're hearing problems. This is a really, really like deep rabbit hole for anyone who wants to go there, but there's no other option. And anyone who's not speaking this language, they're fired immediately. If I'm having a conversation with anyone and they're not willing to go to the nth degree to make sure that this is correct, you are fired. You're not on my team. I'm not going to call you back.
Yeah.
That's
Next question.
Tony Mobley, our friend from Noonan, Georgia, says, very happy with my Heil PR40. What would be a good secondary microphone for me in the House of Worship arena and for conversations with Tony Mobley here on this channel?
Good, Mickey?
Yeah, it would depend on exactly what the use case is in terms of, especially the house of worship use. If you're talking about like someone coming in as contribution over Zoom, similar to your show, Tony, I think it would make sense to get another PR40 or similar microphone, like something like the if you're just talking about the USB mics, the MV6, or it can move up to the MV7 or MV7 Plus. So that you have the flexibility to send it over XLR as well. In your house of worship, like inside the house of worship itself, a handheld microphone, like just talking about the SF58 earlier, that might make more sense. Or if you have a preacher or pastor that wants to walk around, a wireless lavalier might make sense there, or a wireless headset microphone. So it really depends on what exactly the use case is.
Go ahead, Alex.
And Tony, just another option, Mickey mentioned the MV7. So if you've got an audio interface with two channels, you can get the MV7X, which is the XLR only version. It is quite a bit less money, same exact capsule, same sound, just doesn't have the USB part. So if you already have other XLR mics, you might as well just stick with that.
Go ahead, Marty.
Right. So if we're talking, so you mentioned House of Worship, Tony, and just want to be clear, if you're, doing podcasts or recording statements or doing interviews, then, any of the microphones that were just recommended would be great. But if we're talking about, microphones for services, for sermons, for choirs, for other performances, it's a whole different ball of, it's a whole different ball game, because they're much different applications in a larger room with different acoustics, and the microphones will not be the same at all. So I just wanted to be clear about that. We're talking about live performance microphones versus essentially podcasting microphones.
And if you have questions, you don't have to log into anything. You can actually just go to askofficehours.global, and that's askofficehours.global. Throw those questions in, and then we'll slowly feed them in over the next couple of days. So if you don't want to log into Makana, of course you can do that. You can go to officehours.global/join and sign up, and you'll start getting emails and so on and so forth. But if you just want to ask your question from your phone really easily and quickly, askofficehours.global. Just make sure that you've got a well-formed question. Try not to be cute because we don't understand it. It's really short. So just ask the question as authentically and straightforward as you can. Next question.
John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, up next. Is there any situation where you would use the headphone output from a Mac to drive audio speakers instead of using an interface?
Good, Marty.
Not if I have a choice. I would only use the headphone output if there was no other option as a very last resort. Just think about what's happening. You're taking the digital audio signal within the computer, and with a very, very inexpensive converter, you're converting it to analog, going out a cheap connector, going over unbalanced wires, and into whatever you're using to drive the loudspeakers. instead of keeping the audio in the digital domain, going out the USB port, going into an actual interface, and then going into your mixer. And even ideally, given today's technology, so many digital mixers have USB ports to directly bring the digital signal into the mixer, keeping it in the digital domain until the very last link in the chain where it gets converted to analog for driving the amplifier for the speakers.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, everything that Marty just said, 1,000%. I mean, like the real thing here is remember that your tiny little headphone amp on your phone or your laptop or whatever, it's got no power in it, okay? And the way that amplifiers work is they hold a massive amount of power to then be a successful delivery system for things that need that power. So when you're looking at like a speaker that is big for a room, for instance, I mean, already you're not going to have any kind of power to successfully run to that unless that speaker is already active with its own amps and all you're doing is running signal to it, but you are deteriorating it just by coming out of that headphone amp. So yeah, that's absolutely everything that Marty said. That's a last resort. Anybody who's showing up to your live show with, trying to play tracks off of like your phone, you look silly and you are absolutely hurting your show. Like, for sure. Do not do that. So
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, if it's a production environment or production situation, only if my hands are tied and I have no other choice, which if it's a production, then I would, if I need an audio interface, then I would have at least two with me. If it's not in a production situation, but I have to listen to something critically, like say if I have to review a mix and I'm out and about and I don't have an audio interface with me, then I would use the built-in headphone output on the laptop. If I have no other choice. If it's something that I don't have to listen to critically, if I'm just watching YouTube video or whatever, then I'll pull out my AirPods or my AfterShokz for those. But for work, use the proper tools.
Yeah, the one time that I use it with headphones is when I'm trying to check for sync because I don't want anything in between me and what's going out. But even then, I try to do that only with the laptop. Once I go to a monitor, I don't know what that is. So if I'm checking sync, oftentimes a laptop with the headphones plugged in is going to be the tightest connection to what you're doing. Still not as good as just analyzing it in an NLE or some other place. But if I'm really trying to see what's going on, that's the one time I'll use it. But I'll use headphones for that typically. Next question.
Next one comes from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Have you ever added too much compression or other effects and thus had your content deemed too loud? And he's got a listing there from TV Technology for info.
Go ahead, Marty.
So the number one complaint that the FCC has always had about television broadcast is the volume of advertisements versus the program. And in September of 2010, they passed the CALM Act, which stands for Commercial Advertisement Loudness Mitigation. And it was passed in 2010, and it was enacted, put in place in December of 2012. And what the CALM Act does is it set standards for loudness of programs and loudness of commercials. Now, what does loudness mean? Loudness is a measure of a number of different parameters relating to perceived loudness of audio. So there's instantaneous. So if we look at a common meter, Luft's meter, this shows you various measurements that are taken, and you can see that there's true peak, momentary, integrated, and these are all measuring audio levels over various amounts of time. So a peak is a very instantaneous thing. Average and integrated and momentary are over different periods of time. So if you take a measurement, audio is always changing, right? So if you take a measurement that is, over a very short time, and a very over a longer period of time, like 3 seconds or so, you're going to get a very different kind of measurement. And you can see how the different meters are changing according just to my voice. Now, there are other meters that broadcasters use, and we can look at, let's see, let's take a look at this one. There we go. So this is from Isotope. This is called Insight, and it has a lot of different types of measurements that are shown. So that gives the engineers a very comprehensive picture of what the audio looks like, sounds like, looks like in measurements, and sounds like, and the consistency overall. And you're supposed to keep within certain parameters during the broadcast. And so
next, I'm sorry, Chris.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to answer mine. Obviously, this is more in a musical context. But yes, I mean, for commercials and anything in TV, there are very, very strict guidelines that you have to adhere to, or you're getting recalls and you're doing a lot of work over again. So that is usually a short-lived thing before people really try and get it. Having a lot of friends who are in post as well. Musically, and I'll just say, like, as far as mixing, a lot of people, an issue that people have is making music way too dense. Okay, and this can happen in any kind of audio program material. It's really bad in music because people packed so much stuff. But if you have dense music, with vocals and all that, that can all eat up the same amount of headroom. You only have a stereo bus for a lot of these delivery systems, if that, right? If it's not mono. So I would just say that be cautious of working really quietly. Little bumps that make things feel like they have perceived loudness, right, can actually just be like you're going past the edge, and then you go into a car or turn up your speakers, and all of a sudden you can hear these extra artifacts that you're not hearing at a quiet level that are eating up all of this headroom, thus choking your overall program. So I'd just say watch for that kind of stuff. It's really easy to go overboard, and the thing that, especially when people are learning to mix, everyone goes overboard with everything because you're not hearing stuff until you're like 2,000% past where you should have stopped. So it's just how it goes, and you just keep on, be tasteful. A lot of effects, things like that. It's, makeup. You shouldn't be able to tell that someone's wearing makeup. It's just like an ad. This is how I use effects, right? Unless I want it to be really drastic and a thing. It should be really natural and not forced.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah. As mentioned earlier, in terms of both broadcast deliveries and also deliveries that go out to mass audiences, the deliverables that go out to mass audiences, there are very strict guidelines, and you got spec sheets in terms of that state the loudness that you're supposed to deliver things at. Have I ever had gotten material sent back to me because it's too loud? No. I love dynamics. Some people boast about, my mix, I can push my mix really loud. My mixes are really strong and loud. That doesn't impress me at all. I love dynamics and mixes. I love the emotion that dynamics can bring. It's an auditory creative tool for me. If you have your room calibrated well and you know how your room sounds, you can mix to spec perfectly without requiring a meter. And yeah, I haven't gotten any shows bounce back to me because they're too loud.
Go ahead, Jeff.
And I think, one of the parts of Roscoe's question, by putting the link in here, important to point out, is this link talks about the FCC is actually right now proposing to take another look. So right now they're voting or have voted on this initiative to listen to or open for remarks on this issue again, because apparently they've gotten a lot of complaints lately. But here's the big hiccup, is whether or not it will cover streaming. And It does not, and of course, rightly so. There's concern about expanding a government agency's reach into online streaming. But that's where, I don't know about you guys, certainly where I experience it a lot is on the streaming platforms or podcasts, especially ads embedded in a podcast, for example, where they just blow your ears out of the water. And all of this potentially updated regulation so far would not cover that. So, but it's also important to point out that the platforms enforce this themselves. As Mickey pointed out and some of the others, all the platforms have their own guidelines and they just do it. They don't ask you, YouTube will bump your loudness down if you're delivering something too loud to it. And they're not going to ask, they're just going to do it. So as everyone pointed out, you should know what your loudness is going out and not let anyone else mess with it.
Next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada. Is it possible to design a multi-view for ATEM Mini Extreme ISO in MixEffect or only through the ATEM software control?
Go ahead, Jesse.
I'm going to make a bit of a leap with this question. I am not sure that you're talking about multi-view. I think you might be talking about supersource, and it's very, very possible to design supersources in MixEffect. I don't think you can redesign the multi-view of the ATEM from MixEffect, and I'm very curious what features you might find lacking in the multi-view that you'd want to rearrange in ways that you can't with the ATEM.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, so you can indeed program your super sources and your multi-views coming out of the ATEM. This, for example, is the ATEM constellation that this very show is being cut on right now. Over here, you can see the super source preset that's currently loaded. But if you go into settings and you go into multi-view here, you can completely select what is being displayed on each multi-view of the switcher.
Next question.
Harold Williams in Portsmouth. What is the difference between audible timecode signals and timecode metadata?
Good. Jeff?
So timecode is a numbering system for video frames. It's generally seen as hours, minutes, seconds, and frames, where hours, minutes, and seconds are the normal thing we're used to in daily life. Minutes and seconds go from 0 to 59, and frames go from 0 to whatever the frame rate is. So if you're in 24 frames, 0 to 23. If you're in 30 frames, 0 to 29. There are no fractional frames. The frame rate of video, 2997, still gets numbered 30 frames per division of second, and it just runs slow. Now, that can be coded as a number in the metadata of a file, which is the timestamp where it starts. Nonlinear editors, digital audio workstations all calculate timecode, and so they don't actually store it. They just have metadata that's stored in the files. Timecode can be transmitted across via MIDI. There's MIDI timecode, and the most common way what you're talking about is audible timecode signals is longitudinal timecode or linear timecode, what we often just call SMPTE. It's named for the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers who came up with this. And it is sent as a form of digital data in biphase mark code, which is the same thing we use for AES. And it's basically a signal that when there's a 0 in the data, we get a transition in the audio signal. It's a digital signal that is sent in the audible spectrum. So it's a square wave, or as near as we can make a square wave. When there's zeros, there's one transition. When there's a 1 in the data, there's a double transition. That's the biphase part of the mark code. So for normal types of frame rates, we're looking at frequencies, fundamental frequencies like at 1 kilohertz, 2 kilohertz. If you think about 30 frames per second, 60 seconds in a minute, you can work out the math for that. And so these square waves might sound like what we're used to hearing a modem sound like. They are able to fit in the audible range. And this, back in the days when we had analog audio on analog videotapes, this is how we encoded time onto them, by storing that audible time code on an audio track.
Good, Mickey.
Exactly what Jeff said. LTC is a biphase signal that can be put out or transported through an audio transport pipeline, like say through analog audio. In the past, traditionally, you would stripe tape, both videotape or even like 24-track audio tape with timecode if you're tracking on tape before digital was a thing. In the digital realm, the in file-based systems in the digital realm, it's typically stored as metadata in the actual video file instead, or in the audio file. When you are in workflows wherein your system or your camera does not have a dedicated timecode input for you to send timecode into, people still utilize the traditional way wherein you're striping the video file with timecode as audio, and you take in that biphase audio and send that into your camera as an audio file. And this is an example of LTC. This is the square wave that, close to square wave that Jeff was mentioning earlier. And this, what I highlighted here, is exactly one frame at 24 frames per second of LTC timecode. And if I play this back, and I'm going to slowly fade this in because it's very annoying to listen to, that's what LTC sounds like.
Familiar sound.
That's LTC. In workflows wherein you do that, a lot of NLEs, several NLEs, such as Media Composer and Resolve, are able to decode that audio timecode. With other NLEs, you have to use a third-party piece of software to be able to decode that LTC signal. I also want to add, though, that with using LTC as metadata in media files, it only stamps the very first frame of that video file or audio file. It does not stamp every single frame of the video file. So it's still very important, especially when you're doing longer takes, that you not only stamp it with timecode for you to be able to line up audio and video and the multiple cameras if you're doing a multicam shoot, but also use sync to genlock the cameras, because that actually dictates the speed at which all your video sources are generating frames. Because if you just timestamp the very first frame, that doesn't guarantee that your sensor is moving at the correct speed unless you have genlock.
Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington says, what do you think of this new NDI audio announcement? And he's got a link to the VizRT Products Connect Audio site.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting product for those that work a lot in the NDI world. I'm skeptical, like, as a product that's coming from a company that doesn't really have a track record in terms of making, audio hardware, preamps, A to D converters, and also clocks. I'm a little skeptical of its quality, but you can't really tell until you use it.
Go ahead, Marty.
So NDI has been capable of transporting multiple tracks of audio, like up to 64 channels of audio over an single NDI video stream for a while now. It's been a couple of years actually, but it's only able to transport that audio with the video between computing devices. Getting audio into and out of the analog realm or into and out of other devices has always been a challenge. And so this particular device has 8 analog audio inputs, which are both mic line, quarter-inch, and XLR, and 4 outputs, and encodes them and decodes them to NDI. So it's a step in that direction, other than using an audio interface that goes into a computer that can then encode the audio into digital for NDI. This appears to do the same thing in a dedicated piece of hardware. So, one of the really big limitations of multi-channel NDI is getting it in and out of non-computing devices like an audio mixer, for example. locating it on stage, getting NDI on stage and getting audio on stage into and out of NDI. So this is I think maybe the first step in that direction. Looking to hopefully we'll see more development in this area.
And last question for the day.
Ike Potter, coming to us out of Hanover, Germany, says, which tuners are commonly found in studios and on stage to get tunable instruments, that is, guitars, to exact pitch or to check pitch? I'm a Peterson Tuner fanboy.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, the Peterson's awesome. The one that I love, especially for guitars, is TC Electronic, their Polytune. Fabulous little box, comes in various different styles. You see, I have the Polytune 2. What's great about these, besides being an amazingly fast and accurate tuner, is you can strum all 6 strings, and you can see which one's out, so then you can focus on which one you need to tune. The other thing I really love is the ClearTune app. It's an app you have to spend actually maybe $1.99 for a tuner, which every musician balks at, but this is one of the world's most accurate tuners, and you can set it up with every kind of, if you're into Pythagorean tuning, this tuner can do it.
I watched Toad the Wet Sprocket's guitar tech, which is constant. There was 18 guitars or something, and he was sitting there just constantly working the whole show. And all I did was take a picture of what he was using so that I could get it for my daughter. And it was the Polytune. And she carries it everywhere and loves it.
My son actually had some time, and he's a guitar fanatic, and he went into Guitar Center and he got every single tuner that they had in Guitar Center and laid them out and did a shootout side by side and came home with the Polytune. So,
Guitar Center should make that part of their offering, is to do shootouts. I guess their relationships with folks would be hard, but that'd be a good show. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, the Polytune is really great. I love that thing. The display on it is really easy to see outdoors in a bright environment too, so that's another great suggestion. Obviously, the Peterson Tuner was mentioned here. A lot of guitar techs use it for its accuracy. The Polytune's very accurate too, but if I was a guitar luthier, I would probably, or if I was a guitar tech on tour with a band and tasked with keeping someone's guitar in tune, I would probably be getting the Peterson rack mount strobe tuner. It's not cheap, but yeah, if you're serious about tuning, I would say that would be the one to go with. And please don't use those $25 clip-on snark tuners if you're serious about tuning.
Thanks to all of the great audio questions that came in today. This is our audio day, and the panel keeps on getting bigger with more experts. I wouldn't say better experts, but more experts. We just keep on expanding. So we've just such a great, rich experience here. So thank you so much for making sure that we got great audio questions today for that panel. If we didn't get to your questions, if they're audio questions, you might want to, if they're really deep audio questions, you might want to wait until next Wednesday to do those if they are. But if the other questions, if we didn't get to your more general questions or video questions, remember, we're here tomorrow. So bring those back. If you put them in over the QR code, we'll get them back. We'll get them automatically. If you put them in Mukana, they're in your notes, so you can pull those back. And thanks to the incredible panel here for being part of this conversation. I'm always excited about Wednesdays and many of the days, but the Wednesday day that I just know we're going to have this great audio conversation. It's really, really fantastic to have all of you here. We can't do this without you. We also can't do it without the incredible team on the back end that makes this all possible. The engineering, the planning, the managing, the editing, the cutting, the liaisoning, the managing the questions. All of those things are happening. There's a huge village that makes every day possible, 7 days a week. We haven't missed a day in over 5 years. So it's just an incredible effort by so many people all over the world, and we really appreciate your contribution. Today, if we'd done this in person and gone and talked to everyone person by person, we would have traveled 22,000 miles. That's 35,000 kilometers, and that is 174 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into after hours. That number seems really low. I think our math is not working.
Did we change the algorithm?
Hey, they let me do the math on that one. Are you saying I can't count?
Exactly.
Did it in baseline.
He's like, hey, we've got all these great people. And I'm like, and I'm here bringing the property value down. Yeah. And then we also let Chris sit in. Just, he's like kind of ill.
Chris, where are you in Chicago?
I'm actually now I'm on the north side. I'm actually 2 blocks out of Chicago now in Niles. But yeah. So I've lived in Rogers Park for most of my life. So if you know the area.
Cool. I'm going to be in Chicago in the next couple months, so I'll let you know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Let me know. We will absolutely get together.
Right,
But those extra
I would love to. We'll grab food or something. Come see the room. That would be awesome.
Absolutely. All right.
Fantastic.
Some deep dish pizza.
Yeah, pizza, I presume.
God, I need walks and salad and sunlight. Not